Hello, I'm the Pink Phantom, and this is my podcast. Join me as I delve into the world of games and gaming, and especially old school RPGs. Together, let's voyage into the astral realm and check out my Phantom thoughts. In this episode, I have calls from Jason of the Nerds RPG Variety Cast and Daniel the Bandits Keep podcast. Links to their podcasts are in the show notes. Another reading from Muster, advice for playing AD&D in the wargaming way, and then finishing off again with more talk of orcs in my Tales of the Dragon Slayer AD&D solo campaign. So let's get to it.
Hey, Jason here. Just listened to episode 73. Great episode. Very interesting way to set up a deity in your campaign. I really enjoyed the way you did that. Your oracle sounds interesting. I kind of have gone the way of the Matt Jackson oracle off what he's been doing on YouTube, or was doing on YouTube, but with just 3 6-sided dice. But no, that's very interesting. I even own any fate dice, so maybe that's something I need to remedy. But all in all, great points in looking at what's going to happen with Paladin, and great points on the calls from Daniel and I look forward to seeing what happens next. So keep up the great work. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for the compliments. Yeah, it was fun figuring out how to. I didn't have a clear idea of what I wanted for, a new god or something like that. And so it was fun to go back to the books and figure out a way to use those resources as inspiration as opposed to using them strictly for rules or stat blocks or things like that. To use them to create something new that still has, its roots within the game itself. And I really went to Matt Jackson's channel after you talked about that, and that's a really interesting oracle as well. I'll link that in the show notes. It's a pretty neat video for anybody that's interested in it. I think for fate dice or fudge dice, you would have to have a reason to have them unless you're like me, you just like interesting dice, and I pulled them out I thought they might be useful. I was wondering how something like that could be useful in decision making as opposed to rolling regular dice on a pre-written table or something. The dice I got are, I think they're called heartbeat dice. They have a line that goes around one axis of the die and hits 4 faces, and on 2 of the faces it's just a straight line, and on the other 2 faces it's got one of those up and down squiggles like it would be a monitor when the heartbeat comes up, and then of course you have the 2 blank sides. So those were pretty neat when I saw them, so I just picked up a set. But I think you'd have to have a need for them if you're not playing fate or fudge, but you have something that you need, positive, negative, or hit miss, or some other sort of binary result, and maybe with a neutral result mixed in. That's what they could be useful for. So thank you for the call. Jason is a oftentimes caller. Has his own podcast, the Nerds Variety RPG Cast, and that is linked in the show notes, as well as the video to Mac Jackson's video about his own oracle, which is interesting. So I advise checking that out if you like that sort of thing.
Hey, Pink Phantom, thanks for clarifying that rule as it would be in AD&D about the order of how you pick, classes, races, etc. I think in my mind, I was going off basic, right? Because, of course, basic is races class. And the first thing you do is you pick a class after you roll your ability scores, and then you can adjust your ability scores based on your new class. And of course, at that point, I suppose you could lower it below the minimum, although you really can't, because the minimums are 9 and you can't lower ability score below 9 anyway. So kind of doesn't really track anyways, but I think that's what I had in my head. So that's probably where I had the rules jumbled. But yeah, very clearly, based on what you read, I would interpret it as your way. However, and so my argument wouldn't stand. However, the point that you made about you wouldn't suddenly stop being an elf, would you, if you lowered below what a minimum was for an elf? So I think Yeah, that's another thing. Though a paladin is a special case, so I think you're in a really interesting space here because, frankly, if it was a ranger, I don't know, yeah, if it was a ranger or some other class of fighter, because I think in AD&D most classes have some restrictions or minimums, right? So a thief, if it was anything like that, I wouldn't make them lose their class because then what would they be? But a paladin is one of those few classes in AD&D that you can lose, right? You can lose it by going against your alignment. It very clearly spells that out. So, yeah, pretty interesting. Anyways, that's cool. The other reason why I wanted to call in was about your Oracle. I really like it. I think that's really fun. And I bought some of those Fate/Fudge dice a while back because one of my friends ran, well, what was supposed to be in a short campaign, but ended up being one session. And I bought the dice after the first session. So I have them sitting around. So that might be fun to experiment with. I wonder if I like your idea of using where they fall on the table. I really like that kind of stuff. This is one reason why rolling physical dice is nice. But I wonder too if you could use different colors. I can't remember if they come in different colors or if you have them in different colors. So you could do that as well. If you roll the plus minus, maybe one supersedes the other. The only issue or thought that I have with this is that the Oracle seems to always give you the same basic answer in the sense that, like, no matter what's going on, it will always give you the same percentage of your pluses and minuses, right? You can't really change that because you're only rolling two dice and they're always the same. And I don't know that there'd be a way to modify them, right? So that would be the only downside to it that I can see. And what I mean by that is, for instance, the Oracle that I've been using a lot, the Mac Jackson Oracle, you roll 2d6, basically, if it's a 50-50 chance, and you take the highest one, so you do two different colors, basically. But then you can roll a third die in the middle and say, okay, well, it's more likely, so I'm going to consider this dice positive, or it's less likely, so this dice is negative. And that allows you to kind of influence the Oracle a little bit. So again, I love the idea of the plus minus, but I wonder if there's a way to influence it. I guess you could do it the same way. You could do what I said at the beginning, use colored dice in addition to your plus minus, and then add more of them. Well, I don't know if that would really work. So I'm probably talking around in circles. So what I wanted to say was I really like it. I'm going to pull my fate dice out and maybe try that next time I do some solo play. See how it works out. I think it's pretty cool because really most of the time you don't necessarily have to use a third die, even in the one that I'm using. Just a straight chance is good. So very, very cool. I love how you kind of rolled to create your own god. That was really fun. And the maybe you figured it out by now, or somebody else may have called in, but the Noonian, or however they say it, is Fritz Lieber's creation from Farford and the Grey Mouser. So they were in Greyhawk, not in Greyhawk, I should say. They were in AD&D because I think Gygax maybe, or somebody in the company was actually in connection with Lieber at the time and got permission. And because they're even in the edition after they removed some of the other ones. But also there was a Lankmar supplement, so you could play in Lankmar in AD&D. So just a little history stuff, which you may already know, but for people who are listening, if maybe they didn't know it, that's where those gods came from. And they're really interesting, too, because they're almost, I know you rolled the one was like a demigod, but I don't think a lot of them are actually true gods either, because it's like a weird cosmology. But I love how you put it together with the insects and the thieves, and then you were like, okay, there's searching and recovering. Really, really good. This is the thing about rolling random stuff, right? Just really brings our creativity forward. So awesome. And I'm looking forward to see what happens with the orcs. I'll talk to you soon.
Hey, Daniel. Yeah, I thought those gods were associated with Greyhawk, but I wasn't 100% sure of it. So it's good. It's good to hear that my deep nerd knowledge was on point for that. As far as the Oracle, there are ways I think you can adjust it. What plus minus means and what the double blank means will make a difference. Because the way it breaks down, if you have a double of something, plus plus minus minus blank blank, it's basically half the chance to get one of those as to get one of the mixed results, plus blank plus minus. Because it breaks down to essentially 9 possibilities, and so you have some that are 1 out of 9, and some that are 2 out of 9. So if there's a slight difference, if it's like it's a little more likely or a little less likely, you could change what the plus minus and the double blank means. So to give yourself plus minus, the plus and the minus could be yes but, and the double blank could be no, but something good happens, or you could flip them, and that would give you a little better chance of getting that yes or no, but it wouldn't be an exceedingly much larger chance. There are different colors of fate dice. I'm sure of that. I know the little heartbeat dice I'm doing. I've got a purple one and one that from the tone I think it's a glow in the dark. I haven't really tested it out. So you could do that. You could do it positional. One takes precedence over the other for the plus minus, and then, like I said, use the double blank as a special case or maybe some kind of a push. You just don't get an answer right now. But you could use multiple dice. I think, as I recall, it's been a long time since I looked at anything fudge or fate related. But I believe a lot of those systems, you do sometimes tend to roll handfuls of dice based on skills or talents or circumstances or whatever. And you're counting the pluses and you're counting the minuses. And if you have more pluses than minuses, you succeed. And if a task is more difficult, you need more pluses overall, that kind of thing. And what you could do with the Oracle is, if you deem it, more likely, less likely, you could roll 3 dice and say the first minus, if it's more likely, the first minus doesn't count. Or if it's very likely, the first 2 minuses don't count. So the pluses kind of had you don't have a bigger chance of getting a plus, but they have a better chance of sticking and giving you that yes answer, because you only need 1 net plus to get that yes. And, the reverse is true. If it's less likely, the first plus doesn't count. Or you could say blanks count as pluses or minuses, depending on if it's more or less likely. So you could do it with multiple dice to throw in there if you wanted to utilize a greater gradient than just yes and yes, yes but, no, or no and. You get that a greater than that 6-degree gradient and better separation than just there's twice as much chance of this and half as much chance of this. And as far as the orcs go, well, we're going to hear more about them in just a little while. That's foreshadowing, folks. But thanks for the feedback. And now let's talk a little more about muster. The next section of muster, starting on page 131, is maintaining a campaign long term. D&D campaigns are super long compared to many other role-playing games. 100 sessions is not particularly exceptional. In any other game, I consider 20 sessions to be crazy long. I don't actually have any particularly clever observations to make about how to get the game to go long. For us, it just happened when I put the right pieces together. There's this monumental, nigh incomprehensible challenge of mathematics and war that rises from the simple rules and premise, and it asks you, can you even get to the second level in this thing? If you hear that call and then see those 15 XP you managed in the first session and start thinking about what could have been done better, then that's going to take you far. If not, then perhaps it isn't the game for you. Of course, you want to put the practical things right. Weekly sittings, 4 hours is good, on a regular calendar. Open and safe social practices, good hospitality, open call for new participants, and constantly rolling teaching practices. It's not different from any other hobby club, just this one happens to be practicing the deepest game of all. One difference in the creative dynamics between the wargaming way and other types of adventure gaming I've seen is that the traditional RPG campaign exists sustained by a continuous plot, while the wargame D&D campaign is sustained by that terrible challenge. When we played a 50-session campaign of 4th edition D&D a couple of years ago, and the plot came to its conclusion, it was a day of satisfaction and joy. It wouldn't have occurred to me to keep going. To the contrary, the last third of the campaign was already a heated race toward the end, pacing the plot of the grand fantasy epic. A challenge-based wargaming campaign doesn't usually have such a plot priority. The campaign, when built into a healthy routine, exists more as a social contract between the club members. It's the stage for play, a platform onto which the group can set various adventure scenarios. Instead of being like a novel series, the D&D campaign is like a community theater stage, there to be used to stage wargaming. The implication is, of course, that campaigns can be put away and revived, participants can change, and there is no single character that must live for the campaign to keep going. The campaign lives in the developed rules, setting, and thematic understanding of the subject matter. Stepping outside the text, this page and a half of content here in this section is pretty packed with a lot of things. One of the first things it talks about is 100 sessions not being particularly exceptional for a D&D campaign in the wargaming style. And that's something, that's a strong statement in a hobby that tends to run, I think, shorter number of sessions before it either flames out or comes to a conclusion. But again, a lot of those campaigns are, as he spoke about, the 4th edition D&D campaign he was part of, something that's driven more by a plot. And it stands, if you look at his suggestion of weekly sittings of 4 hours, which is quite the time commitment itself on paper, you talking about a year's worth of campaigning for 100 sessions, because 52 weeks in a year, 2 years. But if you're interested in something like, say, the Pathfinder Adventure Paths, those can take a long time in when you're even with regular sessions. I know Joe, who has the Hindsightless podcast, he's been involved in the Wrath of the Righteous, running the Wrath of the Righteous Pathfinder Adventure Path for several years, and they're just getting into the latter part of those books, and that not even to the last book yet. So it can be a strong time commitment either way, regardless of style. And a lot of people would, hear, "Ooh, weekly, that's hard," and 4 hours, that's a lot of time. And it is, looking at just the things you see posted online, sort of anecdotal evidence, that is a lot. People tend to like shorter sessions, and maybe not even weekly, but maybe bi-weekly. And if you switch over to the board gaming hobby, the broader hobby, board gaming hobby, you'll see a lot of commentary about a good length for games being an hour and a half to play, because of people not having a lot of time. But if you think about it, folks who are involved in sports, whether they're playing them or coaching them, or they just have someone in their family that is participating in them and they have to lend a hand, give a ride, what have you, maybe end up sticking around for practice because they have to give them a ride back if it's the children. 4 hours in a week, on a weekly basis, is not particularly that much. I mean, how many of us sit down and devote 3.5 hours to watching a football game, or 2.5 hours to watching a basketball game? And this is not that much longer than that. And if you figure you're doing it live, you're going to a football game, you're going to a basketball game, you figure in travel, maybe you get a meal before or after, you've made a 4-hour commitment, and it's a weekly basis, and sometimes multiple times a week. So it is something that people fit into their lives when they desire to. So someone with that level of commitment, and he's talking about the level of commitment of people who specifically join some sort of a hobby club where they're getting together with people for the purpose of participating in that hobby, whatever it may be. And that's a very strong tradition in the wargaming idiom, in the wargaming hobby, of having wargaming clubs where people get together and wargame, particularly in the miniatures wargaming side. So, and again, going back to the board gaming hobby, you're talking about going to someone's house, You don't have the time taken to set up. Maybe you'll have a meal or, a sizable snack or something together before or after. Maybe there'll be a lot of kibitzing during the game where you're playing the game, but you're also talking and having a good time. And sometimes the game pauses while you're doing that. That may be a 3 or 4 hour thing that you're doing. And you're probably doing it on a pretty regular basis, depending. Now, for some folks, that's not because they have those other hobbies as well, or because they have other commitments as well. That's not as possible. And certainly, folks with younger kids, that's going to be very difficult. And kids that have their own hobbies later in childhood, it's going to be more difficult to do it for themselves. But for those who have the time and inclination and dedication, it's probably not that big a commitment. If that's something you want to center in your life, and that those are the choices that we make. But that's probably what it takes to keep a long-term campaign going. And there are times you put the campaign on pause. We're deep into the holiday season here in toward the end of the year, where we have, particularly here in the States, where we have United States, where we have Thanksgiving in November, we had Halloween at the end of October, we have Christmas at the end of December, and there's a lot of family gatherings and gatherings with friends and things like that throughout the course of these months. So, of course, that can interfere with something like a hobby of playing a role playing game, and particularly or a war game or the combination thereof that's being espoused here in Muster. So that's a real quick little section. I probably could have added that to the last one if I had realized I was coming up on what looked like the end of a chapter. The next chapter looks like it gets into a little more specifics. It's talking about scenario formation. So, a smaller piece of the puzzle of the campaign, and I think it's a good place to have a break. So this is a little shorter tidbit, and next time we'll cover probably the whole chapter of scenario formation. I don't think there's any point in breaking that into pieces, and we'll see how long that takes us. So I hope you enjoyed this little smaller tidbit. Still a fair amount of book to go here, but we're negotiating through over on the Hex Press YouTube channel. He is also continuing to cover Muster. I think he's up to 5 sessions now. He does it as sort of a live stream read along, and they're usually an hour or a little more. So he's put 5 hours into this as well. And hope you'll come back to the next reading and slightly meandering commentary of as I read through Muster, a primer for war, advice for playing D&D in the wargaming way. And now, more from my solo AD&D RPG campaign, Tales of the Dragon Slayers. Another tribe of orcs, the vile Curly Tails, will be arriving at the party's keep. This raises a couple of questions. What is the party's disposition of forces now that their full force is in residence at their headquarters here, and what will be the direction that the orcs will approach from? In terms of what the party is going to do with their forces as part of gaining ownership of the keep, the party is to help use their forces to help patrol the road. There are basically 20 miles between each of the outposts, and so the party is responsible for essentially the half a day's journey on either side of their keep, which amounts to about 10 miles. And by the D&D handbook, the light troops that they're going to use to patrol the road on a light horse can travel about 60 miles a day, meaning they can patrol their 10-mile segments essentially 3 times over the course of a day. The party is using one of their units of their light lancers and a unit of their light horse bowmen, and essentially taking half of each, combining them in force, and running one along the northern route and one along the southern route, patrolling back and forth. Because the orcs are arriving at the noontime day period, and the patrols would have started roughly around 7 in the morning, running roughly 7 to 7, 6 to 6, 7 to 7, depending sundown and sunup. That means that the troops in question will probably have been an hour outbound on their second loop through their section of patrolled area. So that means that those units will not be available for any battle that should occur. They also are using their light infantry and some of their light infantry and some of their archers to form perimeters around their keep, with the light infantry serving as essentially as skirmishers about 2 rounds, not quite 2 rounds movement away from the keep, with the archers roughly halfway back, where they can keep their eye on the road for any forces coming north or on the north or south road, but also to be within distance of support of that light infantry should they need be. And the light infantry will basically be there if it's a small force to consolidate with the archers and hold at bay while more forces arrive, or if it's a large force, to fall back to a better sort of defensive position on top of the hill of the party's keep is in, or the top of the hill on the other side of the road. And where the party's keep is, while the road in general runs north-south, this particular section runs east-west, essentially between a couple of hills. So the party's disposition, they also have essentially on standby, armored up, weaponed up, sort of a ready reaction force, one of their 2 units of heavy infantry, one of their 2 units of heavy lancers, with the other forces being used to do routine tasks around helping to continue to build and maintain some of the structures they've had to build outside to help house the horses and themselves while the keep is still being cleaned out, and in other days to use to run up and down the road to get supplies from the towns to the south. But right now, all the forces are present in the keep. And of course, some of those forces are also off duty because they will be the night watch. So there are forces that will be immediately available, and there are forces that will be able to eventually possibly enter the fray, depending on how long it takes them to arm and armor up should an attack occur. As far as the orcs, where are they coming from? Well, to the east, to the west of the party, that is the general direction of the Dragon's Cave, which is currently occupied by another band of orcs. And in between that cave and the party structure, roughly, is a group of hobgoblins who have occupied some caves and some of the hills nearby. So it's unlikely they'll be approaching directly from the west, or even maybe from the northwest. To the north, several days' journey to the north, you have the last guard outpost before the town down in the valley, which is currently occupied by gnolls and several other tribes of humanoid creatures that have allied with them. So if the orcs had come directly from the north, or from the immediate northeast or northwest, they probably would have been sucked into that somehow, either through battle or by joining. So they probably did not come from that direction, which leaves sort of the east-northeast, the east, and the southeast and the southwest. Now, the southwest, they would have to be skirting the orcs and the hobgoblins, and also skirting the dwarves that are in the mountains to the southwest, as well as any other creatures that have taken up residence there. And to the southeast, probably something similar. We don't know. We haven't established in the campaign any creatures living in that direction. Also, I should mention in the mountainous areas and hill areas to the southwest, we also have cloud giants in the mountains and hill giants in the hills. So it would be difficult for those orcs to get through there without having already encountered something. There's also the matter of if they are too far south and too far north when they enter onto the road, should they enter near or onto the road, there are other guard posts posted a day's journey in either direction. So they have to have somehow. So the most likely direction is directly from the east, where they wouldn't have encountered anything, and then possibly from the east southeast, where they have come in close enough to the keep to avoid any in any of the outposts directly to the north, and from the less likely from the southeast, and least likely from the southwest. Unless, of course, they have encountered some group that has clued them in to where the party is and helped guide them away from the other potential forces in the area. This could be potentially a group from the Thieves Guild in the Merchant's Town just outside the wall and the castle area to the south that has been looking for the dragon treasure and for the party. It could also be the chaotic neutral party that the party found in their keep when they arrived and they greeted their light horse that had been trapped inside by a wizard lock, and that they found and eventually got out of the keep. And more recently, there has been a lawful evil, chaotic evil party that they located, as well as a group of bandits. But those just left the keep the day before. So chances are they wouldn't have had the opportunity to guide the orcs to this location, although they may encounter them depending on what direction that they end up going and the orcs are coming from, and may end up joining them. So I think the direction they're coming from is going to kind of decide whether they are being directed there. If they're coming from the south, the southwest, or the southeast, they probably have been directed there by some other entity in the hopes of reducing the party's power or in routing the party completely out of the area, leaving the treasure they've collected up for grabs. You just have to take them from the orcs instead of the party. And both groups would be reduced in power by a conflict between them. If they're coming from the east or the northeast, it's probably not very likely that they have been directed by anyone, though they could have run into the bandits who probably are heading north, more likely to head north where there's more open country away from the guard posts where they could establish their bandit ways. And the chaotic evil and lawful evil party, they could in fact themselves be part of the Thieves Guild group and could be headed south to the Merchant's Town, or they could be headed north. So first, let's look at where the orcs are coming from. So I'm going to assign some percentages based on what I just said. I'm going to say it's only about a 10% chance they're coming from the southwest because of all the obstacles that would be in their way, even if they're being guided in. And a slightly higher chance, say 15% from the southeast. So only about 25% between those two. And then you would have from the east is probably the most likely. So we'll say of the remaining 75% chance, let's say 45% of that chance would be from the east. And then that would leave about a 30% chance coming in from the east-northeast. So writing all that down, we're looking at from 1 to 10% southwest, from 11 to 25% southeast, from the east 26 to 70%, and from the northeast 71 to 100%. And that was a D8, so that is not going to work. Let's try again with the percentage roll. A 0-1. Okay, so that is going to be from the southwest. So they have sort of threaded the needle for all the powerful groups of creatures in that area, and they are most likely being guided in probably by the Thieves Guild. So let's see. Let's say that the chaotic evil, lawful evil party. There's roughly let's say it's about 40% chance they're part of that Thieves Guild group. Not half, but pretty good chance. Or the 17% they are. So that means they would have been headed south along the road, and they'd have been traveling probably a little less than a day. So the storyline will be that the orcs, while treading carefully, trying to avoid conflict with the powerful groups to the west, ran into some representatives from the Thieves Guild who let it slip about a party in the second outpost from the town with a good idea of where that was. The orcs were directed in that direction, and between the first outpost and the party's second outpost, they entered. They either are they. That's the other question: is are they directly going to come to the outpost, or will they enter the road between the two outposts and continue north to the party's keep? So we're going to call that 50-50 because the directions they would have been given, I mean, they are orcs. They couldn't maybe not necessarily follow the directions properly. So it's probably, let's say 50-50. So we'll break out a D6 for this one. On a 1, 2, or 3, they come directly at the party's location from the west. Otherwise, they come along the road, which will be up south and then west to. There'll be a bend where they turn to the east. So they'll either approach it from the hillside or they'll approach it up the road. 1, 2, 3 is the hillside. 4, 5, or 6 is the road. And all 3, they're going to be approaching the hillside. So there's not as good a chance that they will encounter the lawful evil, chaotic evil party and perhaps have them join the group. So let's say it's a third. I'm going to roll a d12 because you don't get to use d12 much. So on a 1 through 4, they do encounter that party. The party decided not to necessarily go just back down the road to the town, but to work across country, maybe looking for some cheap treasure. And on a 12, they don't encounter them. So it will be just the orcs approaching from the west, approaching from the hill to the west. So they will run into the pickets of the light infantry and the archers on that side when the alarm is raised. And that basically will set it up. This does leave the question of a reaction roll, though. Even though the orcs are intent on going after the party's keep, the party's wealth, they could be, when confronted with soldiers, be taken aback by what they find there because, not expecting stiff resistance, for example. And there is a matter of the leader of whichever light infantry unit they run into, because there are 3 to choose from, and 2 of them will be deployed. 1 of them will be on that side. So we're going to roll for a few things here and see how things turn out. I guess the first thing is, since they are intent, let's see if they surprised the humans, even though they are essentially on patrol. So we're going to reduce their chance from surprising from for the humans being surprised from 2 in 6 to 1 in 6. And with a 3, they're not surprised. And are the orcs surprised when they run across the human units on this hill? There'll be potential 2 out of 6. With the 6, they're not surprised. So no surprise. So an interaction, perhaps some posturing, some threatening, some attempt to intimidate by both sides. And so this is where which unit is deployed on that side is going to come into play, because the lieutenants in charge of each of those units, one has no bonus from charisma, one has a 5% bonus, and one has a 30% bonus. And this would be important for the interaction because due to the difference in alignment between the two groups, both to the person that will be the lieutenant that will be interacting with them and with the associated group, there is a total of, just from alignment, a minus 55 to the reaction roll. And the other thing is there are two racial preference charts. One of them is for character races for party members for PCs, and one of them is for humanoid types in relationship to each other. But I'm not aware of a chart that combines the two. But there are adjustments for that for charisma reactions, for charisma reactions when encountering a group. But half orcs are considered tolerant of humans. So I would say orcs are certainly no better than that, and that will be another minus 5%. So you add all that up, that's a minus 60% total to the dice, which on the reaction table would drop you down to no better than a 40% positive, which would be uncertain, but 55% prone toward negative. So it's going to make a difference which of these lieutenants is interacting. So we're going to roll to see which two units were deployed and which of those two units is on that side. So 1, 2, or 3, the lieutenant with a 30% is in unit 1, with a 5% adjustment is in 2, and the with no adjustment 3. So which two units are deployed? We're going to roll the d6, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That'll be the divisions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. So 3. So the second unit is deployed, and 1, the first unit is deployed. So which of those two will be on that side? And this time I'm going to roll a d8 because we want to use as many of the dice as possible. And it will be on a 1 through 4, unit 1 with the 30% adjustment will be on that side. And on a 5 through 8, the 5% adjustment. And on an 8 is the 5%. So the total adjustment to this reaction roll is going to be minus 55%. So it will have to be a very high roll indeed to avoid immediate attacks. And it's a 68, so minus 55 is 13%, which is hostile immediate action. So the orcs are going to attack. And then we will get into the battle. We will roll initiative and see what happens. So there we are, orc attack. Gotta love it. The opening music of this podcast is Strength of the Titans, and the closing music is Late Night Radio, both by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. Thank you for listening to Phantom Thoughts. I would love to hear your feedback. You don't have to be part of the show. If you want to contact me and let me know, hey, these are for your eyes only. I just wanted to give you thoughts, ideas, response, and it's really for your eyes or ears only. That's absolutely fine. I'd love to hear from you either way. So just let me know when you contact me. Just, I don't want to be part of the show. There are lots of different ways you can contact me. You can send me an email at phantomthoughtspodcast@gmail.com. And that can be a regular email, or you can attach an audio file to it. You can use the message button on my podcast site on podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/phantom thoughts. You can contact me via my Google Voice number, 864-209-1441. You can contact me via SpeakPipe at www.speakpipe.com/phantom thoughts. You can contact me on Discord, The Pink Phantom. All this contact information is listed in the show notes of every episode. And thank you for those who call in. Thank you for those who don't call in. I appreciate you listening and hope you'll listen again next time. Until then, I hope you have a great day.